You wake up, check your messages, race through your commute, and sit down at a desk loaded with a never-ending to-do list. You spend the next 10 hours in constant motion. Yet when the day ends, you feel entirely scattered. You have been highly active, but you have not moved forward. The standard cultural advice for this exhaustion is predictable. We are told to push through it. We assume that if we just drink another coffee, block out the noise, and force ourselves to concentrate, we can outwork the fatigue. But this relies on a flawed assumption that our environment is neutral. As tech critics like Tristan Harris point out, digital platforms are actively built by behavioral science teams, groups that study human habits and psychological triggers. These platforms are explicitly engineered to capture, fracture, and hold human attention, regardless of our deeper personal interests. Relying on raw discipline in a frictionless digital landscape is an architectural mismatch. When your brain is constantly rewarded with fast-moving, bite-sized inputs, it adapts to that medium. Over time, the natural capacity to sit quietly and engage in deep, demanding thought begins to erode. Feeling distracted is not a personal failure, and it is rarely a lack of effort. It is a design problem. To fix it, we have to stop trying to force our attention through sheer willpower and start engineering a completely new architecture for how we work. Every time you shift your focus between a spreadsheet, an email, and a group chat, you engage in context switching. This diagram illustrates your cognitive processing power. As you rapidly pivot between tasks, that central pathway splinters. Each switch leaves behind a mental residue, draining your energy and fragmenting your focus. The first line of defense is disciplined narrowing. You actively prune away the noise to protect that central pathway. This requires designing a physical and digital environment where your priority is obvious and all other distractions are made physically inconvenient to access. Once the environment is cleared, you need an engine to drive your behavior. You build a habit loop. This cycle consists of a specific cue, a routine, and a reward. The cue acts as the trigger, setting the entire behavioral sequence in motion without requiring you to manufacture fresh motivation. You optimize this loop by shrinking the routine down to a tiny 2-minute action attached to something you already do every day. By making the action impossibly small, like writing a single sentence the moment you sit at your desk, the threshold for failure drops to 0. Every repetition acts as a psychological vote. By finishing that tiny task, you prove to yourself that you are becoming the type of person who follows through on their intentions. Consistency builds the actual architecture of focus. When you design an environment that favors these manageable habits, you replace exhausting, erratic effort with reliable, automatic momentum. We often assume the solution to a scattered life is stricter time management, but a perfectly color-coded calendar is entirely useless if you sit down to work and find yourself cognitively and emotionally depleted. One of the heaviest drains on your capacity comes from open loops. These are the unmade decisions, vague intentions, and unfinished business lingering in the back of your mind. They create an internal hum of constant silent pressure that drains your mental reserves. Human beings are not machines built for endless linear output. Our attention operates in cycles. To restore your strength, you have to deliberately capture those open loops, writing them down and deciding what action they actually require to clear out the psychic space. This means renewal must be actively scheduled. Protecting your sleep, finding moments of silence, and allowing for emotional recovery are not rewards you earn after a productive week. They are the strict biological requirements for performing well in the first place. Once your energy is protected and renewed, you funnel it into scheduled, non-negotiable blocks of deep work. Instead of scattering your effort across a dozen shallow, reactive tasks, you apply maximum bandwidth to a single high-value target. Mastering focus is ultimately not about managing the ticking clock. It is entirely about managing, protecting, and renewing your energy to preserve your cognitive bandwidth for the things that actually matter. Once you have built this architecture and maximized your efficiency, you are left with a much more difficult question. What exactly is your highly optimized system aiming at? A driven life is ruled by urgency and public opinion. It is characterized by constant motion and an endless chase for applause. A focused life operates differently. It is deliberate, anchored by conscious choice rather than frantic reaction. A focused life is guided by a clear conscience and a search for meaning. As the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl observed, we find this alignment when we stop asking what we want from the world and start asking what our circumstances require of us. It is a shift away from vanity toward responsibility and human dignity. True success is rarely found in endless accumulation. The ancient Stoic philosopher Seneca taught that a worthwhile life requires maintaining calm judgment and inner freedom. It requires refusing to be enslaved by the constant desire for more, no matter how chaotic the external world becomes. When life becomes painful or uncertain, simple productivity hacks will collapse. But living by core principles, like integrity and trust, concepts championed by thinkers like Stephen R. Covey, protects the mind. It creates a profound inner steadiness that external circumstances cannot break. True focus is the ultimate act of integrity. It represents the power to consciously choose exactly what deserves your life, energy, and unwavering attention.